Have you ever noticed that if you try to swallow food or water, you stop breathing? It's actually impossible to do both at the same time. I mean, you could try it, but it would be very difficult to do. You could also die. So why is that? It's because the pathway for the food, the esophagus, and the pathway for the air, the trachea, both intersect in a region called the pharynx, which is that region just behind the mouth and nasal cavity. Whenever you eat food properly, as in you chew your food then swallow it, the mixed food and saliva are turned into a ball-shaped substance called a bolus, which the tongue voluntarily moves into the pharynx region. This triggers your involuntary swallow reflex, calling upon 50 different muscle pairs controlled by 6 different nerves. Oh shit, it's coming, Jim, it's coming! As the bolus enters, the pharynx begins to send signals to the swallow center in the brainstem, which tells our brain to tell our body, hey, stop breathing. What? But this is done to prevent any food from entering our lungs. Next, our brainstem sends signals to our muscles to contract, pushing the bolus down our esophagus. But what if some of the food doesn't go down? What if I decide to eat food while doing a handstand? Does it come out of my nose? Does it come out of my mouth? Alright, you weirdo, you want to be like that? Fine. But also, very impressive handstand. You see, we already solved that in Human Evolutionary Bug Patch 1.1. While we're swallowing, our tongue blocks the oral cavity to prevent the food from coming out the mouth, and the upper pharynx and soft palate close together to block the nasal cavity and prevent the food from coming out the nose. Not only that, but the muscles contract in a wave-like fashion to move the food downward or upward into your stomach. Gravity plays a minimal factor here, otherwise astronauts would be fucked. As the bolus is entering the esophagus, we need to make sure it doesn't accidentally enter the trachea into our airways and kill us. Yay! Luckily, the bug fix was introduced in Human Evolutionary Patch 1.2, called not breathing, but also using this little guy called the epiglottis. Which is like a small flap which covers the trachea as the food bolus passes by. Epiglottis! The muscles also contract to close the larynx, which is the front area around the trachea entrance, also called the voice box. And it gets pushed up a little so it's right under the mouth floor. You can see this by looking or feeling your neck every time you swallow. Afterwards, everything returns to its normal positions, and that's essentially how we swallow. But also how we could die every time we eat. Because let's say we're eating dinner at the Dinkelbergs, and Mr. Dinkelberg is telling us about his hilarious story of his trip upstate, and you, being jealous and competitive, need to one-up the man in his own home. So you proceed to inject your cooler story into the conversation midway through your meal, and now you're chewing and talking and swallowing, and now the piece of steak has slipped past the epiglottis and is firmly lodged inside your windpipe, preventing you from getting proper airflow. Introducing Human Evolutionary Patch 1.3, players can now unlock the new ability, Coughing. Developer patch note, coughing can only be used when the airways are not completely blocked. Luckily, it's the year 1974 because that's when the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Henry Heimlich has invented the Heimlich maneuver, which is not a wrestling move but a series of thrusts created to form a rapid upward pressure on the diaphragm, forcing air from the lungs to expel any foreign objects lodged in your windpipes. So now you know why some animals that have separate pathways like birds, whales, and dolphins can swallow foods whole without choking, but humans can't do the same thing as elegantly with something like a 12-inch sub. Hey babe, watch me swallow this in one go. So why is that? Why do I have to flirt with death every time I try to wolf down a quadruple bacon cheeseburger with extra quadruple bacon mayo? Actually, I think death is there for a different reason. Sure, we have opposable thumbs, superior endurance, trichromatic vision, but come on! Burb. And also not choking to death would be nice as we climb up the evolutionary food chain. We lost to that? Well, turns out there might actually be a good reason for it. Humans have evolved to have a lower positioned larynx which may increase the risk of choking, but also allows for a wider range of vocalizations, or making sounds, which is important for speech, communication, human language. Remember the pharynx, this entire area? Well, it's responsible for breathing, swallowing, and talking. Like that one person responsible for all the work in the group assignment. Okay, that makes sense, but why is it all combined? Why can't I separate it? Because breathing, swallowing, and talking all use similar components, and separating them would mean copying and pasting duplicate anatomical structures. And now we're increasing the complexity of the human body. Sharing is caring. If we separated breathing, swallowing, and talking into separate functions, it would also mean that the nose would have to be bigger because the mouth can no longer help us breathe, and we would also need 2 mouths, one for eating and one for talking, which also means 2 sets of tongues for speaking and moving food, and 2 sets of teeth for chewing food and pronouncing hard consonant sounds. All this added complexity will also cascade into other parts of our bodies. Our heads and neck would have to get bigger, our lungs and stomachs would also have to rearrange themselves for better support. So thank you, Mr. Pharynx, for pulling an all-nighter and coming up with a solution to facilitate all three functions. Is it perfect? No. Would I rather evolve into a freak of nature? No. Would I rather give up speech to have separate pathways and do this? Maybe. What I do know is that if you made it to the end of the video, then you deserve a cookie and a stamp for today's class participation. I hope you learned something and had fun doing it. Thanks for watching my first video on the channel. Subscribe and support your local Asian businesses. Goodbye.